Westerners are, in general, happy-go-lucky, well-meaning, naive, open people. Westerners are unique in the world, but because we have the population levels that we do, and many Westerners live in Western countries and don't get out much, they seem to think that being a Westerner is the most normal thing in the world, but it's actually quite rare. And Westerners seem to think that their uniqueness will continue, that they have a right to live on this planet when other groups, shall we say, that are possibly in the majority don't see it that way. The way they see it, 2% or less of the world population has over 50% of the geography on the planet. At least they get to dictate terms there because of certain things like naval supremacy and their land holdings, etc., etc. And maybe they don't want that deal to continue. Like maybe they want to just allot 2% of the resources to 2% of the people. Like maybe they'll give that, but maybe not. Maybe they are worried that it could flip back the other way and they could lose everything. It might not be 5 years down the line, but definitely 20 years down the line or 50 years down the line. See, because there are no historical inevitabilities. So this is another complete and utter failure of the cultural classes, the academicians, political scientists, however you want to call them, is that they look to the past to discern the future. And yet that has never been possible. And yet they have to somehow justify all of their learning. And what is their learning? Well, it means that they know certain facts from the past. That's what makes them an expert. So, but if knowing little facts from the past can end up misleading you in that you think that you've accumulated a lot of knowledge, which you can be tested on, and you can prove it, and it's quantifiable, makes you misperceive what's actually happening in the moment of even, let's say, international relations or the dynamics of international development, such as, hey, these people we thought wanted the same things as us are really working for our demise. That type of change in perception. Have you ever had that? Or have you've probably seen some movie or read some book where that happened, just like betrayal. Is it Gold of the Desert Madre? Something like that. Start off the same, you work hard together and you actually get rich, and then what happens? Somebody loses their mind. The person you signed up with, the person who was on the up and up, gets some crazy idea in their mind. You can also think of it about relationships, great relationships. Then at one point, one party gets jealous, and then the other party keeps having to justify themselves to the most irrational reasons until it's no longer fun being around someone who is essentially crazy. And because of their craziness, demands that you change, not that they change. And then there's people that get stuck in relationships, especially dependent relationships, dependent economic relationships, dependent political relationships. And then we start thinking about, okay, well, what do Eastern tyrannies have in terms of advanced knowledge that perhaps the West doesn't have? And then we need to think, well, there could be a bunch of things, but one thing they might have is, for example, political sabotage, subterfuge, and political manipulation. Like, just imagine, because they're not allowed to play politics in their one-party states, just imagine that they have a certain departments of people, maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 different departments of people that get to play politics, but in other countries. But not politics that lead to the strengthening of their geopolitical competitors, but to their weakening. Which brings me to the Hicks Pasha metaphor from the Battle of Cheyenne, where here he is out there in the desert of Sudan, trusting his guides to bring him to an advantageous place on the battlefield, or perhaps bring him to a place where there is water that they... Which brings us again back to the military card. It's really about the military. The military is supported by the economy and, of course, socially and politically. But if the politics are gone, then you start seeing the decay of industry, because you have the decay of law, which allows for these oligarchs to use the system for their own benefit, which means you have a weak and fragile and inefficient economy. You have demoralized and wasted people, workforce, falling numbers demographically. Why is that? Well, hardships. Why hardships? Well, how about this, having no meaning in life, because there's also no meaningful employment. Oh, gee, could that be? But why is there no meaningful? And then you get to the politics again. Well, they're playing the roof for these self-enrichers that also could be geopolitically connected with enemy forces. Because even if they're not, see, that's usually where Westerners stop with the allegations. Oh, it's just self-enrichment. They're not selling out the entire country. Well, in some cases, they're doing both. And see, that's beyond like the concept of a normal person. What, is that possible? Of course it's possible. See, a lot of people go in a bank and don't think about robbing it, but criminals do. Normal people don't. Those are the voters. You can't see criminals. Criminals don't exist according to journalistic standards, because criminals that's their roof, their information roof is the information landscape and operators therein. Nothing trickles down, then there's no consequences. There's no tree that fell in the forest. Nobody heard it. So you got a roof over a roof. So, but when you have a trophying country, because of all of these self-enriching practices or enemy actions, well, how long until you're not a factor for opposing forces? The opposing forces of greed that want to get your stuff. See, they want to be the people that operate with impunity, but with connections. They don't want just to rob a bank. They want the whole country. And it really isn't a big investment for them. For them, it's a game. Again, politics in their country, it's not possible. But messing up politics in other countries, that's possible. There you get full impunity to do whatever your little black heart desires. They fly them in there. They become language experts. Maybe they live there, take a lot of vacations. You can find people that would do that, especially in totalitarian countries where the alternative is living like a potato in some grim dystopian factory. So this has been going on in Russia since 1917. And a similar process in China, and the West just does not want to admit that, does not want to see the reality for what it is. Because they don't want to see that reality, they don't want to act appropriately, and so you have all these different people gumming up the windows of perception. And so the measures are not enough. It's like, oh, you have 5 things that you need, but you don't have the other 5. But let's give ourselves a gold star for having those 5 things. Rah, rah, rah-ism. They're not bringing the required amount, and they're certainly not bringing more than the required amount. They're not taking the appropriate actions. So just apply that metaphor to every metaphor you can think of. So the airplane pilot should be at 300 feet approaching this particular runway, but he's at 600 feet. So he's close, but not where he needs to be. He's just off by 300 meters. He should be 500 meters to the south, but he's 500 meters to the north. You just think all the different applications where leadership and decision making is really important to get exactly right, that they're not getting right on a strategic level, like not even close to right, not maybe half right, 40% right. But they need to be 100% right. Now, this is not to overestimate who we're dealing with. They have their own problems that they might not survive. They have their own challenges that they might not survive. But we can't hope for a lucky break on that. It's not what political leadership should do. Like, oh, if they, shoot themselves in the foot, we win. That's the long-term perspective.